creating a culture of love.
Persistence and sticking with it.
Yeah.
Probably the most important recipe to succeed in anything. You're constantly sabotaging yourself by choosing to be liked by other people by putting their needs ahead of yours. Mm-hmm. And then that's an easy trap to fall into self-pity, which we definitely don't want to fall into. So it's like, be mindful of having the agenda, but also be mindful of not breaking your back for everybody else's needs. You have to make sure your cup is full first.
Sometimes we put ourselves with our back up against the wall on procrastination. I do that. I live by it. I thrive by procrastinating and forcing urgency, but living life urgently and with urgency is more like intentionally and trying to move forward and so far focused on your vision.
Take the parts of the culture from the past that are still relevant and serve, and bring them with you as you add more to it. Mm-hmm. And be okay with the next generation doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because your son's reality is nothing you can anticipate. It's your boy Humble the Poet. I am an artist, author, creative, entrepreneur, and beard model. And I am on Living Through Love podcast with Ruben Rojas, who, as you will know, did the cover for my last book, How to Be Loved. And we are discussing, masterminding, and strategizing the culture of love for 2023 and beyond.
Humble, welcome to the studio. You are my first repeat guest, and I am so honored to get you back in here.
First time to be the second time.
First time to be the second time.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. And we're on year 2 of the show now.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank
you. That means a lot. Persistence and sticking with it.
Yeah.
Probably the most important recipe to succeed in anything.
50 episodes have been published just before us having this conversation now.
Wow. What if you can go back to episode 1, now that you are episode 50, what is something you tell yourself?
I can't believe we're actually here. Okay. And what were you so afraid of?
What were you so afraid of? Now, if you could be episode 50 Ruben and jump to episode 100 Ruben, what would you tell him?
I would say, get ready because we're about to hit 150.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah. That's the first thing that comes to mind. At the end of the day, we start these things. I had an idea for a podcast for a really long time, but I knew the heavy lift that it was. And with all the things I'm already doing, it's like, how can I create more? How can I just take the time to do this? And now with a kid and everything else going on, like, we have to find the time and make the opportunity to bring this to life. And luckily, I had a production partner that came in and said, you know what, we got to make this happen, which is why I said yes, not knowing anything. But I was terrified. I'm like, I've never been on this side of the sea. Like, got to ask the questions, got to have these conversations, and ultimately getting to 50 episodes.
Yeah.
So.
No, listen, I commend you. I've never jumped into this space, and I think that's one of the reasons why. You got to be consistent, and there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of moving parts, and it's not as simple as having a conversation. You win if you have in the conversation. All the work that leads you to the conversation, that's where it's really hard.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what people get to see.
Yeah.
Through the efforts and the storytelling, what we're doing. But now we're here. I'm glad to have you on again. And, we are 2 warriors in the space of love, right? We do it in our own way, but we're essentially talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing that we're men also doing it, and men of immigrant descent. Yeah. And, brown. We're in the middle of the black and white divide. And I think it's really important to have these conversations and just share it. And as far as having it land one way or the other, we can't control it. But putting it out there, we can control.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying now is, like, we're creating a culture of love. We have a lot of talk about the culture. You hear Kendrick rapping about it all the time. Yeah. So it's like, let's create this culture. Let's continue to be a part of it. Let's create this culture of love. And then one day, I think in the history books, we're going to look back at this. And if there's a renaissance around awareness and a renaissance around change and art, hey, the renaissance is a love revolution.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring it up that way, because this is also, like, through your work, especially too, there's a pragmatic element to this. There's I am I am observing the world and I'm understanding the challenges that the world is facing, and I'm working with the world to implant and amplify a message of love, versus what you might have seen in like the 60s where it's just like all you need is love.
Yeah, completely different.
Yeah, and you're like, what is this? You know, I remember the first time I ever did ayahuasca, there was a nurse. It was in Peru, in Cusco, and there was a nurse on site, and she was just there to check your heart rate or whatever. But I remember at one point when it was getting really overwhelming, I was like, look, like give me some NyQuil, give me some. I get it, I'm done.
Yeah,
I don't want to do this no more.
Exit.
Yeah, exit. Let me. This is gonna last 8 hours. Let me just sleep it off. Okay. Yeah. And she's like, no, you'll be okay. Focus on the love. I was like, what the hell does that mean? What is the love? Like, focus on the stool, focus on the lamp, focus on the love. Like, you're making it even more abstract than it needed to be. And it took a while for me, like, okay, love. What am I going to focus on? What am I going to focus on? Love. And I kept saying it, love. And then immediately went, mom. And then my mom's face came. And then like a whole shower of warmthness and safety started surrounding me. So it is that first step. And I feel like back then they just kept it like, all you need is love. Love is the answer. You're like, what's the question? You know, and I feel like what I love with what you've been doing is like, you're like, hey, I am taking this message, even if it's an aesthetically beautiful piece of work that makes someone smile when they see it, or it adds beauty to a neighborhood, or starts a conversation. I am doing this in the places where people are at. I'm not making people just find me. And I'm incorporating myself into the mainstream, into people's day-to-day lives, and I'm ensuring that that's a thing. And I think that pragmatism is so important, because you got to meet people where they're at. You can't just expect them to be where you're at.
Exactly.
Because you're a result of a journey itself. You know, you didn't start like this. You were a corporate Ruben at one point.
I know.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to see that, just Google Ruben Rojas. The stuff still shows up. That's how I found
My
it.
old LinkedIn photo.
Your old LinkedIn photo shows up.
Yeah, we might put it up. We'll see if my editor will throw it up real quick.
As you should.
But no, that's very true. And I think what's true here is going down this journey and going on this path, and maybe you can relate. I got my journey quick, and I started doing it, showing up consistently and practicing it. But quickly you can see that maybe instead of being the example, you're talking about the example, right? And sometimes it's really hard, the fine line between telling someone what to do versus you can do it, go quit now and become that side hustle, that hobby, or saying, hey, this is how I did it and this is what I did. And telling that story, and then maybe they can connect the dots. Oh, I could figure out how I can do it too. Because telling it someone, sitting on the top of your soapbox, that will land on deaf ears. And that's also something I'm always cognitive. I'm very sensitive about, because my journey is my journey, and I figured out how to do it. And your journey is your journey, and you figured out what led you to your third book and all the things that you've got going on. But what is that difference between telling someone, because we hear it from the 60s. We said it. It was more hippie. It was free spirit, marijuana, anti-war, all these things. And it was important in that time. But what we're talking about now is actually digging in, looking inside, and doing the work. Yeah,
I remember I heard this quote. Like I grew up heavy in activism. And I remember a quote that actually shook me in my 20s was, idealism is for people who don't want to pay attention to what's happening, and then having a new level of idealism, which is I am paying attention to what's happening and I'm going to disrupt the reality, versus I am ignoring the reality and I'm going to be constantly having rude awakenings, which is going to lead me to a world of being cynical and jaded. And instead it was like, I have to understand the nature of things. I have to understand the nature of the world and do that. And I feel like what was happening back then was a lot of that. And then when we start thinking about even things in the wellness space in the 90s, you had this aspirational element to it, which was like, hey, look at me. I used to be messed up and now I'm not messed up.
Yeah.
And for 3 easy payments of $19.95, you cannot be messed up too.
Exactly.
And it's very linear. It's this really linear situation. And I think where guys like us are coming is like, hey, I'm in the mud with you.
Yep.
And here are the things that I'm trying. Here are the things that matter. And you resonate with my story because it's your story too. And when I speak about love, I'm speaking about peace and my happiest moments when I was at peace. And anybody listening, their happiest moments is when they're at peace.
Yeah.
So this isn't an infomercial to sell a dream or an idea. It's more of it's reconciling ideas that we might have lost because we live in such a fast-paced, distracting world that does not incentivize this type of living. It's not This world does not incentivize you taking care of yourself, slowing down, meditating. This world's going to incentivize you just work, go, work. And then it'll give you all these things that you think are love that aren't love.
No, they're the things that fill in, put the Band-Aid on the gaps, because that was me in my 20s. Yeah. Hey, go make a ton of money, show it all off, get all the girls, look successful. You have the American dream. Yeah. And then I lost it all because in 2008, I went bankrupt. Yeah. At the same time, then I got a DUI. Like, I got down in the dumps. Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm still me. I'm still quote unquote broken. Yeah. According to whatever we want to define that as. Let's not go deep on that, but depressed, not worthy, not enough. But we've discussed we are enough, we came out enough. How can there be enoughness if we were made perfect? Yeah. But we create constructs and stories that we choose to acknowledge and start defining ourselves with and allow the world to say, no, buy this, get bigger boobs, freeze the fat, get that truck, get the house, keep buying more to make us feel whole and enough. Yeah. And the other thing is also like, we're saying we're in the mud with you. Like, dude, I'm still going through all the things.
And you will forever.
Exactly.
Forever go through it.
We just have more tools and more practice to get out of the mud a little bit quicker. We still go back into it. We could just clean off a little quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And also the lotus grows from the mud. So it's, we need to be in the mud. The mud is life. It's like, I think about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is about the logotherapist who was, I don't know how he was doing this, but from an academic perspective, he was mentally logging his experience in the Holocaust. So he was a prisoner in the Holocaust. But while he was a prisoner in the Holocaust, as an academic, he was observing it through the lens of an academic.
Oh, wow.
Saying to himself, I need to document what's happening here in terms of how are these people surviving without food? How are these people have hope for living and everything? And then at one point he got paper and pen, started writing notes, lost it all when he transferred. Eventually he survived, got out, wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning. So if you think you're having a bad day, read a book about a man who survived the Holocaust, and you'll see a completely different thing. And he talks, and he refers to the famous quote, "To live is to suffer, to die is to find meaning in the suffering." It's this world of buy stuff, be happy is promising us a world without suffering. We'll make it easier for you to get your food. We'll make it easier for everything. But that easy is the disease. That easiness is what's messing us up. Yeah. And it's really about diving into this mud instead of trying your best to avoid the mud, because it's going to catch you. It's going to find you. That is it. Life doesn't exist after the obstacles. Life is the obstacles. Yeah. And I think, and then love is that fuel that keeps us willing to do the things that we're doing. And I think that is a much better purpose than viewing love as some kind of magic pill that you take it and everything is fine.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not. No. And what you just said earlier, it's like easy and comfortable. That to me, I think, is death. It's mediocrity. It's complacency. It's just phoning it in and being on the bench for your athletes. Hey, I'm on the team. I'm on the bench. I don't need to go in there. I don't need to put in the work. But at the end of the day, we do. I think life is the ultimate challenge. And as humans, our greatest growth comes from uncomfortableness, from suffering. But I think it's how we frame suffering. Does suffering mean we have to be in the corner, whipping ourselves or crying all the time? Depends what we're crying about. But no, it's moving forward, acknowledging this, and what is this test? What can I grow from here? Where can I go, and how can I apply it? Yeah. And love is not a rom-com. It's not Hallmark moments, and it's not Valentine's Day.
Yeah, definitely not Valentine's Day. Again, more excuses to phone it in. Yeah. I don't treat you well all year. Let me get you some overpriced roses. And I think it's a really interesting thing because as I said, like this idea of selling convenience, I first learned about that through Derek Sivers. Derek Sivers he made CD Baby. He was the first guy to sell music on the internet. He figured it out how to do it before anybody else, did it for himself, and then did it for his friends, and then started CD Baby. And then he was invited by Steve Jobs when Steve Jobs was getting ready to launch iTunes. Yeah. And Steve Jobs explained to this room full of internet music sellers that people will take easy over free.
Yeah.
And I remember at that point I was giving music away for free but you had to download the MP3 and figure out how to put the MP3 on your phone, and it was free. And people would message me like, just put it on iTunes. I'd rather pay $1 and have it automatically sync up with my phone. And you realize easy is what people are chasing.
And here's the thing, you know, on the record, I've always been an entrepreneur. One of my businesses was getting music to people. Yeah. Now as a creator, like, forgive me everyone, I didn't mean to take away from anyone, but you know, my dad built computers. Yeah. So, and I learned really quickly, if I sell CDs, give people music, they're going to love it. And I became the CD guy on campus. You know, I was also the football player. So it's like, we had all these cool things of like, oh, this is the CD guys on the team. Like, go hang out with them. At one point, I think I had 20 computers going at once, because back then it took an hour to 2 hours to burn one CD. I'd have stacks of CDs. So there's still a tremendous lift of effort to me to create all of that. And I would sell these CDs. And eventually I made DJ mixes. And those are the ones I really sold, because I knew how to put a party together. But the easy thing was, sell them the CD. The hard thing was everything I did to get the money, but I knew what was convenient for them. This was pre everything. This was like Napster.
Napster days. Yeah, no, I was there with you. And it was interesting, because then sometimes you could even, someone's a friend and you're like, look, I'll show you how to do it. No, just give me this, just give me the CD.
No, exactly.
I'd rather give you the money to just do it for me. And I mean, that's us getting our toilet fixed. That's us, doing half the things that we do. Someone else can do it, and it can be quicker and cheaper, which is fine. But I think chasing an easy life is a different story. So you might pay someone to fix your toilet if you don't know how to fix toilets, but that gives you time to go to the gym and voluntarily put yourself in uncomfortable situations for your own personal growth. And I think that's the really big thing that I want people to become aware of, because that's not going to change. You can hear this podcast in 30 years, and that's not going to change. Chasing convenience and easiness, I think the quote is, chasing an easy life doesn't give you much of either. You know, we have to lean into things that are difficult, and that's going to unlock our potential. That's going to unlock an evolved version of ourselves, and it's also going to build our self-respect, which is way more valuable than our self-esteem.
No, totally. And leaning into what is difficult. I mean, we want to run away from that. We don't want to lean into it. We want to run the other way into the fluffy pillow on the other side. But also choosing easy, let's talk about it. It could be a mental mindset of like, I'm choosing to see this obstacle as easy so that I can attack it and go through it. That's completely different than what we're saying here on like the red pill or the blue pill or the fat pill or the suck the fat out, all that kind of stuff. But also at the end of the day, choosing how we want to be able to spend our time. It doesn't behoove me to fix my toilet. I can go show up at work or what my mission is in life and earn money and hire someone whose mission in life is to fix the toilet, give them work, and I could go do what I'm doing. So it's also making the most loving choice in that moment to figure out what's the best thing for us.
Completely, yeah. And it's also knowing, the value of your time and how you spend it. Because as I said, everyone can now learn that on YouTube, but that's still going to be an extension of your time. And at the same time, if someone wants an hour of Ruben's time, it's much higher than paying somebody else an hour to fix the toilet and letting somebody who's a specialist in that space do their thing versus you doing it as a newbie. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. And then recognizing our interdependence. That is also a language of love in terms of working here, instead of having this codependence, which is what some of us do with our addictions. We are addicted to people. We're addicted to lifestyles. And that's a codependence where it's like, I can't live without you. That's not a sentence that comes out in love. That's a sentence that comes out in a cheesy love song, or in a rom-com. But like,
you complete me.
You complete me. You're my better half. All of these types of things. When really it's like, no, let's view each other as interdependent. It's not, as I look at it as, codependent is me and my dog. Interdependent would be me and the cat. Yeah. It's like, I'm here, you're here. I'll hit you up when I need you. And we're good, and we can lean on each other sometimes. Totally. But we have to be two independent units, and in terms of romantic relationships, that allows you to have two separate pillars to hold a lot more up. And it's been really interesting, because I've been thinking deeply about this idea of just like, where do all these ideas and traditions come from? And speaking to my mom grew up in a village, so I'm only one generation removed from that type of lifestyle. And, I'm like, well, how many people were in the village? She said, 100. And all these rules and policies and kind of our internal setup is designed for that. And then we come over here to this new world, and all that stuff no longer serves us. Yeah. And so now it really is about just stopping for a moment and reflecting and asking ourselves like, okay, well, how much of, and this is what we should all be doing irrespective of your culture. I think with every culture, and I think, the War of Art talks about this a lot. The greatest enemy to the artist is the fundamentalist. And the fundamentalist being defined as somebody who thinks yesterday was better than tomorrow, right? So somebody who's like, this is how, let's say, we just had the Super Bowl. Let's say they're going to make field goals worth 4 points instead of 3. And then all of a sudden someone's like, no, you can't change, I recently on a random Instagram video learned the history of football. They were adding rules. It was a handoff sport for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was like somebody broke the matrix when they threw it for the first time. And it was Aboriginal individuals going up against these Ivy League schools where they weren't big enough to run through them, so they would outrun them. And so the rules were being made as the sport evolved.
Yeah.
Make room for this to happen. So when it comes to culture, whether it's sneaker culture, hip hop culture, whether it's what it means to be from South America or Colombia, what it means to be Punjabi or South Asian, we are not just participants in culture, we're contributors to the culture.
Yep.
And the best way to do it is take the parts of the culture from the past that are still relevant and serve, and bring them with you as you add more to it. And be okay with the next generation doing the same thing. Because your son's reality is nothing you can anticipate.
Nope.
So there's a handful of universal truths you can give him, and there's a handful of, you're pretty much going to be a boomer to him. And he's going to be like, you don't know what world I live in. and it's on him to disregard the stuff that is not relevant anymore. But that's challenging because we live in a country where they didn't even have electricity when they were making the rules and writing the Constitution and setting it all up. And I think that's been a really interesting thing because that's fundamentalism. It's like, no, it was perfect the way they wrote it. And it's like, how? How could it have been perfect? We have to constantly revise these. And I mean, the Constitution has many, many amendments, which means you can keep amending it.
Yep.
And I think it goes back to this idea of the meme is the horse tied to the plastic chair, and it says you are as free as you think you are.
Yep.
That's what we are prisoners of. We are prisoners of these narratives. We are prisoners of these habits. We are prisoners of these traditions and cultures. And that other funny meme is tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. This is what all of this stuff is. If somebody walks into your studio and I don't know, pops the bottom of a spray can and does something super funky, and you're like, you can't do that. That's not what it was made for. That's, you are going against all the principles of art. They just did something brand new that might have never happened before. That should be celebrated. And I think that is something that if we're all just become aware of it, being like, okay, well, what are the cultures that I participate in? What are the rules around that? And who are the people that are disrupting that I should support? Who are forward thinking and who are trying to preserve it the way they are, whether it's the rules in a certain sport, whether it's the way a certain music should be, whether it's the definition of what it means to be a man or means to be a woman, or the definition of love, any of this stuff. Who gets to decide all of this stuff? And who is the magical they that DJ Khaled keeps talking about that makes all these rules? It's society.
The puppet masters, right?
The puppet masters. Well, I don't even know because I think DJ Khaled's talking about they don't want you to win. They don't want this. The puppet masters are going to take a piece of that profit. So it's not them. It's, it's the society that wants you to stay in line because it has its own agenda. And I think for me, recognizing that and realizing that you're not butting heads with it, you're operating out of love for something greater. And I've been listening to Michael Singer's, I think it's called The Art of Surrender. And he was like, all of these things holding you back are garbage. They don't even require visiting. You don't have to process them. You don't have to think about them. And then he goes, and if you want to express yourself from the highest frequency that you know is available. And it's none of this stuff. And I thought that was a really poignant idea to think about because we're held hostage by imaginary situations that may or may not happen.
And we're choosing to be held hostage. We're actually our own hostage takers in much of this because we have the information and we're not choosing to question it and move it forward. And, culture is a funny thing. And we're constantly creating, constantly evolving it. And I think if we ask the question, what parts of humanity can we continue to push forward while interjecting current technology, current ways of thinking, and science, right? Because now we know we have more science, more technology. There's a graph, like over the last 100 years, it was a flat line of technological advancements, and all of a sudden, it's a rocket ship. It's just at a almost vertical trajectory. Like every second, something's changing. The newest iPhone, the minute it's released, it's already obsolete. Yeah. So we start thinking that like arranged marriages, cool, it worked for a reason. Is that the right thing to do now, or any which way, be going to a job for 40 years, retiring with the gold watch? That clearly doesn't work. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Pensions aren't there anymore. We've got to be proactive in how we save for our future financially. So why aren't we looking at retirement for our emotions? How are we emotionally going to retire healthy and well and moving forward? Like, great, I got a couple mil in the bank account, but my mental game's all messed up and my health is all messed up. Like, what supersedes the other?
Yeah. It's like you blow your proverbial knees to earn that money, and now you're a vegetable or something, and you're a shell of who you used to be. Yeah. But yeah, you got a juicy bank account, and now what? And it's interesting because it's also approaching it with grace in the context of like, I understand the appeal of the templates, because when I'm tired and I don't want to think, it's the template. There's, and then when I'm tired and I don't want to think, I'm turning in to the fast food spots, and I'm doing whatever's easy, quick, and cheap as well. And forging a life is hard, and then the beaten path is beaten for a reason. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is not serving us on higher frequencies when it comes to love, when it comes to experiencing peace, when it comes to serving beyond ourselves. Because this stuff is going to encourage our isolation. It's going to encourage us to believe that we live in a universe of one, not in the right way, a universe of one, but as if we are the only universe.
Exactly.
And anything that inconveniences us is a complete crime against humanity, even if it's been happening forever. And that, challenging ideas, because it's like, okay, the person that told me to work 40 hours a week until I was 60, it worked for them because it was working then. Exactly. And they define that as safety and security. Just paying attention to the world will let you know that that is not a thing anymore. Forget if it's a good idea or not. It's just not a thing anymore. My mother worked at the Kellogg's factory. My dad was a cab driver. And they purchased a 4-bedroom house in Toronto, in the city limits of Toronto. I don't think a cereal factory worker and a cab driver can purchase a home
today
anywhere with whatever they're making. I was like, and trying to explain to, and mom was like, well, you guys just aren't working hard enough. I'm like, no. I was like, it's not. I'm like, and I had to show her. I'm like, listen, at one point, 33% of all homeowners were under the age of 40.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, now that's dropped to 13%. It's changing. The landscape is changing. Hedge funds are buying property and never selling them again. The supply, it's a different world. It's a completely different world. And we have to pay attention to what this world is. It's, cars were made out of different materials, and then they've slowly become more efficient, cost-effective materials. That's going to continually happen.
Yep.
Your favorite foods as a child don't taste like what they taste like now. Things are going to continue changing. Having an opinion on it doesn't serve anybody any purpose. Recognize the direction, see where it's going, and see how you can contribute and benefit for yourself, for your family, and your community in that. And that, I think, is where we have a lot of this kind of tension, is fighting a wave, not understanding that it's happening. There's he's a CEO of Braintree. I don't remember his name, Brian something. He released a documentary on computers connected to your brain. The documentary just had 3 people. It had one person with not ALS, one person with Parkinson's disease, and they put a chip in his brain, and he was able to. Once they turned it on, he stopped shaking. Tremors. Yeah, there was a person who was blind, completely blind. They turned the chip on, and they could see basic shapes. And there was a person who was tetraplegic, so neck down. Oof. And they turned the chip on and was able to move one arm and feed themselves cereal.
Wow.
And then he showed, he was showing that, you can hook up a computer to your brain and detect anxiety. So, and he goes, and it's a very crude graph. And he's like, look, all this is showing is the same thoughts happening 70 times. That's anxiety. You're thinking the same thing over and over again. Then he showed a mat, like just a mat that he put on his head, and it was able to read that. It was able to, so non-intrusive abilities to read your brain waves, not even plugging, not Johnny Mnemonic plugging something into your brain anymore. Yeah. This is just, you can wear a cap and it'll read your brain. So so what he's explaining is, he goes, we need to start legislation for thought privacy yesterday. He goes, it's already going to happen, and there is no privacy for your thoughts. And we're already in a situation where we can just put something on your head and start reading your thoughts. How far away are we from just reading your thoughts by pointing something at you?
And then controlling those thoughts. That's crazy.
I mean, the controlling of the thoughts can just is already happening with the marketing and everything else.
True. Subliminally, we're being trained, we're being programmed. But imagine actually upgrading your actual operating system.
And there's no loss update on that. Yeah.
You know what's scary about that? Because I don't believe it could be untrue. To me, it's almost fact, like it already exists, right? It's like, oh yeah, of course that's going to happen. You see things happening all the time.
Yeah.
But I want to go back a few steps too. You know, when we talk about how our parents made money, like my parents had 2 nice cars, a house. We were in private school, and I'm like, dude, I generate income. We all generate way more income now than we did back then. It's just life is more expensive and things are much different now. But let's look at that on relationships, right? Yeah. Our parents got married early 20s, let's say. More people now are getting married late 30s, 40s, having kids way later. So, and why? Is there something wrong with that? We like to be judged, dude, you're getting married that old, you're going to have a kid that old. I'm like, we live longer, we're healthier, we know what's happening. And I'm just saying this to reinforce these old construct ways of being. I could not have been married at 20 with a kid. I'd be divorced. Is the divorce rate so high because we were rushing into that early? And we didn't even know who we were, having these conversations of what is love, who am I, how am I showing up in the world, who am I going to be? And then you become that, and you're like, oh, my partner and I are strangers because you weren't ready to be in that position to grow together. You were still becoming who you were. So it's like, even that's interesting. Like, everything's getting older for a reason because we're living longer. So these old ways of being to the new ways of being and what we're going there. And then this thing with technology now. And
the important part about even with the technology is I spoke with him after, and, you know, I'm just like, so, you know, like, what are your concerns in terms of like where you think it's going to be in 10 years? And he goes, there's no concern. He goes, it's happening. He goes, stop having an opinion on whether it's good or bad. It's happening. And I think that the way he said that to me is how I view this change in this world. Like, stop having an opinion on these things. Things are changing. Ask, how are they changing? Don't ask, do I like that they're changing? How are they changing? You know, and having these conversations with my parents, being like, yeah, I'm not the doctor, lawyer, engineer you want me to be, but they also don't have the job security that you thought they were going to have. Yeah. They're also way more stressed out than you thought. They're also, you know, what was required for them to get through med school was a relationship with Adderall or something else like that. And now, you know, they're hooked on that type of stuff or whatever it may be. And I was like, meanwhile, you know, my actual job is a self-employed entrepreneur, which means I have no level of comfort ever. Every paycheck feels like my last paycheck. And I'm constantly, even in the most abundant times, moving with a level of urgency that I got to keep going.
Yes.
Which is never going to hurt me when the world goes to shit.
Yes.
You know, so I'm developing necessary skills. This isn't stuff I can explain on a resume. You know, my game plan isn't apply for another job if I lose the one I have.
No, exactly.
So I'm equipped for safety and security, not because I have an easy life, it's because I'm stronger for dealing with a difficult life.
Yes.
And that's something that you can universally pass on to generations. That's not going to change. Don't ask for an easy life. Ask to find strength. And strength comes from dealing with difficulties, lifting heavier weights. And I think that's the important part. And in doing that from a space of love, realizing, and again, the most successful businesses in the world are successful because they provide value to the people that give them money. It's service.
Yeah.
You know, serve. View people from a lens of service. How can I serve you? How can I leave you better than I met you? That will, from a spiritual standpoint, be beneficial. From a superficial building a reputation standpoint, leave you better off. It works in every capacity. It's not counter. You know, you can promote love, have a spiritual journey, focus on what really matters, and still win in the world of finances and business. Yeah. You know, because finances is not a zero-sum game. You know, you making more money does not impact my ability to make. You're not taking it from me.
Nope.
You know, if anything, your wealth generation creates more wealth. If you buy a house, it makes it easier for me to buy a house because more housing will be created, well, hopefully, depending on how they do it. But that's what it is. It's not a zero-sum game. So even for our fellow artists, don't look at financial success as the enemy, because it's not. No. If anything, it's a metric to get you out of your ego.
It's not selling out, right? There's this other thing like, oh, if I'm successful, I'm selling out. Or like, I want to pause there and interject because you said a couple key things. Number one is living life urgently. Yeah. Like, how do we live urgently and not anxious, right? Sometimes we put ourselves with our back up against the wall and procrastination. I do that. I live by it. I thrive by procrastinating and forcing urgency, you know, but living life urgently and with urgency is more like intentionally and trying to move forward and so far focused on your vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, and it doesn't allow for complacency, right? And the other thing, self-employed, thinking it's your last paycheck, like never taking your foot off the gas. You know, sometimes I see people, we make a big payday and all of a sudden I'm gone for a year traveling, and then you come back, you're like, whoop, broke, I have to start over. But you lost all momentum, all urgency, all everything, and now you're like, how do I get started again?
Yeah.
So like those two things right there in our space, and then realizing that we're not taking away from each other, we're amplifying and adding to the cultures that we're already creating, and then in that space creating more wealth and abundance in everything, whether it's art, financially, emotionally, so that we can all win.
Yeah.
You know, we rise by lifting others, we win together. It's both and.
Yeah. And it's also, and again, even just keeping it out of philosophy and keeping it from a pragmatic standpoint, it's like abundance theory, you know, is 2 fast food restaurants will share a parking lot if it means everyone associates that as fast food alley. Versus 2 fast food restaurants being like, that's competition. We got to be far away from each other. You see McDonald's and Burger King close to each other all the time. If a group of guys go to the club and all their goals is to meet girls, they will be way more successful working together than competing with each other.
Yes.
Abundance theory is the idea that there's more than enough for everybody, which there statistically is, and working together. I wrote a book about love. A month later, Jay Shetty drops his book about love. His book and my book are not competing. His book and my book are competing against people who don't want to read. Because there is never a person who read the book who says, I can only have one book.
Yeah.
You know, people reading his book will motivate them to pick up mine. People reading mine motivate to pick up his, and 10 other books about love.
Yeah.
You know, it might get them in the genre. Like, I never knew I needed to read about this. And they'll clear the shelves. And it's really understanding that that's actually what it is. It's not a philosophy. That's how business is. They will operate. There was a Super Bowl commercial. I don't know if you saw it for Coors Light versus Miller Lite. They had a whole commercial. These guys were doing martial arts, fighting each other, competing for the commercial. And at the end, it's like, this isn't a commercial for either. It's a commercial for Blue Moon. And you think, like, this is a Super Bowl ad. They just spent $5 million to give Coors Light and Miller Lite free exposure. Yeah. Or maybe it's the same owner. Who knows? But the idea is, like, there's something creative there because it made it memorable. And I think, recognize children of immigrants, we were raised in scarcity. But that scarcity was really about saving and putting yourself in a situation to survive and eat food.
Yep.
But there gets to a point where your scarcity is holding you back. It's making you think small. It's making you live small. And then, and entrepreneurs realize way more important than your money is your time. So then investing in having more time and realizing that, time being your most valuable commodity. Now, it's not just time for you to paint. It's time for you to reflect. It's time for you to walk. It's time for you to spend with your child. All of these things matter because that's going to feed that other side of you that creates the art that it creates. Selling out, I think there's versions of selling out, but I think selling out is when you get derivative and you start asking, what does everybody else want versus what do I want? And I think as artists, we've all come across it where sometimes, you want to pour your soul into something and nobody receives it. And other times you have happy accidents and it's a hit.
Yeah.
I have a friend who reached out to me a couple of days ago. He's a music producer and he was commissioned by somebody who has a clothing line to create some music for the runway. And, the individual who's commissioning the music could not articulate what he wanted. Understandable. If he could articulate what he wanted, he'd probably do it himself.
Yeah.
And there was back and forth, revisions. Obviously, the person requesting was making incorrect references, like, oh, I want EDM, and then he give a reference song and it wasn't even EDM. Yeah. Again, he's hiring you because he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And at the end, what it turned out to be was my friend was not asked to produce any music. He was asked to mix songs. So he wasn't being hired as a creative. He was being hired as a technician.
Yeah.
Like, you have all the equipment, you know how to do this. And I was like, and then, you know, it was frustrating to the artist. I'm like, listen, it was an easy check, and you're not appreciating that. You're not a sellout. You were provided a cook to order, and you have a choice for that. I'm sure you've been given cook to order stuff, and then so now and then, like, our collaboration, it's a true artist collaboration, and talks. And I think for artists, it's recognizing that, you know, the beauty of Los Angeles is teaching you how to create monetary opportunities off your existing art.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it is here. Some weirdo director makes a film, and then a bunch of suits in marketing have to figure out how to frame this film for everyone to want to watch it.
Yeah,
you know, and it's like there's an art to that, you know. So this isn't necessarily making money makes you a sellout. You know, making money means you provided enough value to someone that they put you in a position to continually do that. You're helping people articulate. You're giving people an emotion. You're giving people a feeling, and that's completely necessary. That's why people pay for a Netflix subscription. They're paying for art, you know? And there will always be people who are purely in it for cook to order. I think a lot about, you know, as I'm out here, you know, I'm meeting a lot more entertainers, and I'm meeting a lot more people who are in the industry, and they're not artists trying to say something or contribute. They're trying to figure out what will work, what will get me money.
How do we sell this? How would we package it? How do we market it?
Yeah. How do we, you know, and then and reverse it. How do we market it before we even make it?
Here's the marketing plan. Now go make something to fit the box.
Yeah, and a fantastic example is, I think the new trend right now is that streamers are realizing that people are watching the old stuff more than the new stuff. So let's say you got Netflix and people are only watching Friends on Netflix. So now they're going to start creating content that feels like Friends, you know.
That 90s show was reimagined. It's blowing up.
Yeah.
I think they just renewed it. It was like the number one because it was a hit back when it came out. So they're like, let's bring that back.
And it's less risk on their part. And again, that will always exist. Friends was revolutionary when it came out. There was an artist there that took a risk, and some suits in a building that took a risk, and they knocked it out of the park. And now they're going to squeeze it for everything they got. Harry Potter, the same thing. All of these, someone took a risk, did something creative, and then it trickles down and it turns into how many versions of this can we create? And you've seen that with your work. You've definitely seen that with my work. And that's just, but that's the nature of how it is. And all you can do is, you know, keep creating.
It's the dilution. If you keep showing up the way you started, you'll continue to elevate and evolve and move to the next thing. And then going back to put a pin and a cap on the selling out, when someone calls you a sellout, that's coming from their own scarcity. And I'm not bringing it up like it's brought up a lot. I just hear other artists saying it about each other, in all spaces. And I think you can only really call yourself a sellout if you give up on your vision, your mission, your purpose, and you phone it in and you're done. I think that is the true definition. But if you're allowing someone to put you on this other map to continue to be true to yourself and share it, you're not. You're just now making money. Now you have an opportunity. You got someone backing you to continue pushing your mission forward. Yeah. And that's what it is at the end of the day, right?
It is that, and I think it's also, you know, in the communication and in the honesty. So let's say, for example, you design me a one-of-one love piece, and I'm going to the Grammys to wear it. And I'm super hyped, you're super hyped, everything's good. And in the last minute, you get a call from Jay-Z. He goes, I heard about this love shirt you got. I want to wear it to the Grammys. I think how you handle that makes a difference, but Jay-Z should still get it.
Yeah. That's a damn good example.
You can communicate to him and say, look, I made it for you, but the amount of eyeballs it'll get with him will make everything 10x easier moving forward for this moment and this mission, you know? And I feel like if it's communicated to me, you know, now if I start calling you, you don't pick up the phone, and all of a sudden I just see that shirt on Jay-Z, I'm calling you a sellout. But really, and that's just a communication thing. Yeah. You know, it's still a no-brainer. And I think what I realize is that it's those reminders of the totem, because I'm going to get reminded that I'm not as big as Jay-Z. And LA is great at that. LA is this city is so good at reminding you that you ain't shit or you ain't good. There's always someone.
There's plenty of people that are more than you
Always.
in every capacity,
And
according to whatever.
Yeah, and you will get canceled on for them. You will be overlooked for them. Your seat at the event will be taken away for it. It's going to happen. There's a hierarchy. You are nowhere near the top, and nor are you going to be ever provided an opportunity to even climb it. You know, and the people that did climb it, they did whatever they did to get there. And my bitterness could potentially sit. And again, you know, you have a podcast, and I'm sure you're reaching out to people to be a part of it, and some are coming, some are not. But they're viewing it that same way. And I think that's the interesting thing. And that was a conversation I was having, you know, with somebody else when you recognize, was it us yesterday, Chase? We're talking about it. About the amount of time it takes to be on a podcast is the same, whether it's the biggest podcast in the world or it's not. Yeah, it's that idea where it's just like, so it was funny.
Let's say that so that it's not off camera and back on camera, or he's gonna have a hard time.
Okay.
He just said yeah. He just agreed.
But he asked, you know what? Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the idea is it takes the same amount of time to be on a podcast, irrespective of the size, which is I think is the beauty of the concept of podcast. But you know, it reminded. There was a friend in Canada who had a book coming out. This was before mine, and he was hinting to me to connect him with my network, not understanding that that's not how it ever works. I can make all the intros in the world. I've had intros made for me. You know, you can intro me to all your famous friends.
Yeah,
they'll either say yes to be polite and not do anything, or you'll get a no, or that might even create distance between you and them, or what have you. And what I did was I said, look, here are the ones that are going to say, I'll look into it, and they'll never get back to me because you're not the first person to ask. And I go, and here are the ones that I actually think will respond. And then his response was, oh, well, I looked them up. They're not as impactful. And I'm like, you're playing the same game that you're frustrated is being played with you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you don't know who's listening to what. I remember last year, randomly, Tiffany Haddish posted one of my quotes from a piece of content that I created in 2011. I have no idea where she found this. And she posted it on Instagram. It was the strangest occurrence I had ever seen. Like, that content was made before Instagram was a thing.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where she found it. You know, so you don't know when you do somebody's podcast, it's in the air forever. Forever. You don't know when somebody's going to hear it. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck was a book that was out for multiple years, selling 200 copies a week, and then it blew up.
Yep.
You know, it just has to be out there. And playing this game of like, you're important, you're not important, we're signaled that, especially in this city, but it's not something of value, and it just has to be communication. If I called you 5 minutes before I was supposed to show up here and said, they just gave me courtside tickets to the Lakers game, can you please not hate me if I go? I feel like that's a lot easier than just ghosting you.
Yeah.
But it's still communicating to you something, you know.
Totally.
And I think, you know, and we just had a conversation about something that could have been uncomfortable if there wasn't a conversation. And I think that's all it really boils down to. And that's still being done with love.
Totally. Communication, that's the important thing there. And I'd be your plus one, right? God damn. No, but what you're talking about there, it's so true, because at the end of the day, if you are so committed, you know, to your vision and to your mission, the audience size doesn't matter. It's another person that may not know you yet, and you had an opportunity to share your vision, your voice, your craft, your art, whatever you're putting out in the world that you otherwise didn't have. So Joe Rogan or, you know, Ruben Rojas, for the lack of a better word. Does the audience size matter? No. Does the opportunity for a conversation matter? Yes. And guess what? In a world, you can be so selfish and say, hey, I'm going to get content out of it that I can share. So at the end of the day, again, it goes back to us being in charge of what am I, if I'm going to put in everything that I'm putting out in the world, something of value is going to come out from this, regardless if it's their audience, my audience, whose audience. But now we have content in the good to share, to put in the big machine of the world that's moving all our missions forward. So even if you reframe it that way, it's going to be good.
Yeah, and that's an important way of looking at it, is how you look at it. The angle that you look at it, whether it's, as you said, this is the piece of content. I have friends, you know, that are in a band, and every so often they get these gigs, and they're based out of India. They get these gigs where They'll be, you know, some lavish party. They'll be outside playing on a stage with a dance floor, but everybody's inside mingling. And then he's like, well, I just call those paid rehearsals.
Yeah.
He goes, we still give it 110%. We're playing for nobody, but we're getting paid to be here, and we'll make the most of it. And I was telling that to my friend, I'm like, listen, man, you got paid. I'm like, your technical skills are still required. Like if I said, hey, Ruben, can you help me do a piece of art? And you're like, yeah, let's talk about it. And then later on, I bring a stencil. I'm like, no, you have a really steady hand. Can you just color in the red for me?
Yeah.
You know, you might be like this ass, but it's at the same time, like, that's a technical skill that you actually have.
Yeah.
It may not be an artistic skill, but it's a technical skill involved in the entire process. And I think that's still an important side of this. It's, you know, learning how to edit my own art allows me to get paid to edit other people's stuff if I wanted to. And, you know, and I've written speeches for other people, and I've done all these different things. And there's all opportunities to put yourself in a situation where, if anything, the more money you make, the less likely you are to sell out, because then you can keep your art precious. You know, and I have a friend who, you know, he was making video content for himself, built a team of 8 people to do the scripted video stuff, and turned that into a business. And then found 5 other clients who were going to pay him to write their scripts, shoot their stuff, and everybody's stuff looked almost the same, but he was making money. He saw the problem for himself and then did that.
Yeah.
And expanded on that. Now he can say whatever he wants in his content because his technical skills are allowing that. And I think the creativity is not simply in the expression of the art, but it's also in the expression of the business and the strategy. And it was Andy Warhol that said business is the most interesting type of art. And so us going back to the horse tied to the plastic chair, you are limiting yourself with these beliefs. You know, we are so, I do it all the time. You know, and I'm like, oh, but this is who I am. I'm this and that and that and that. Social media may not be designed to let people be multifaceted or multifunctional and all of that. Cool. You know, figure out a way to make it happen. You know, and I think that in itself becomes the adventure. This isn't a dress rehearsal. This is what it is.
Yeah, well, there's no do-overs in life.
Life
is just happening. You have another day. Tomorrow is a new day, and you can frame that in, all right, today wasn't so good. Tomorrow it's a new day. We can do better. And that's okay. But you can't say, let's just erase that and then let's start over, because it's already happened. It took something from you. It gave you something. And if we choose not to learn from it, then we're only going backwards or staying in that same spot.
Yeah.
But like life is now. Today is someday. Like, get off your ass and do it. That's what we're saying at the end of the day. And these limiting beliefs that we create, we all have them. I have them all the time. Like, you know, let me message The Rock and get him on my show. I can be like, I'm not big enough yet. He's not, you know, he's going to say no. He's going to say all those things. Cool. But if I don't take that at bat, what if he says yes? What if he's like, you know, Ruben, I love your vibe. I'm going to be in LA. Make it happen. This time I will move mountains. But if I didn't try, and that can only be on me. And
also viewing it from a view of dichotomy, which is either he will or he won't. There's also, first off, his choice or decision is his story, not yours. Number 2, the reaching out can lead to 5 other things that may be unrelated to this. It may be enough for him to just look at your stuff and be like, oh, I don't have time to do this guy's show,
but I'll share it. Or
I'm snatching this clip and I'm posting it on, or I'm doing this, and you have no idea. You absolutely have no idea, because again, his story is his story. We don't have the context, and it's not about creating the stories when we have these gaps in our head. And it never hurts to try. It never hurts to put yourself out there. It never hurts to follow up. You know, the answers already know if you're not asking.
Yeah, and the follow up is also like, maybe not now, but later. Like, who knows what's going to happen? And you practice taking an at bat. You got thicker skin. You got more courageous, however you want to frame it. And we move forward. And hopefully we practice less taking on making up the story and actually just work at, did I do something better? Did I move myself forward? Did we have forward momentum? And go from there.
And it's also, and I don't know who said the quote, but it's like, don't look at the outcome. Look who you became by doing it. As you said, like, you put yourself out there. You did a reach out, you know. That's a step that most people aren't even doing. They've already talked themselves out of it, you know. And it's very rare that, you know, it's like nobody wants to go to the gym, but very few people regret once they're done the workout.
Oh yeah, there's days I don't want to. I never regret going.
Yeah, Yeah.
Even if it's a bad workout, I did something.
You went into something, and it's the same thing with the ask. And you're absolutely right. And even when I start to reverse, and I'm sure it's the same for you, you start reverse engineering a win or a success, you're like, oh, that was a very strange journey. You know, one of the biggest paychecks I ever got in my career came from me meeting a guy who has started a studio, and I went there to give him money because I knew he was helping kids. So I went there to be like, what are you working on? I can give you like $2,000 to help you with a kid. And he's like, oh, we're funded. He goes, but I want to work with you on something. I'm like, all right, cool. We can work on something. But I was just here because I saw some kids on the street shooting a video, and they said they came out of your studio, and I love that they were doing it, and I can give $2,000. The next day, someone walked into his room and said, yo, you got any poets? We're looking for a poet for a commercial. And he's like, a dude named Humble the Poet just walked in here. And the other guy goes, Humble, I never really realized that Humble the Poet actually does poetry. And he's like, yeah. And then they casted me for an Apple commercial.
Yes.
You know, and it was, from a creative standpoint, no headaches. These guys, it was the exact opposite.
Apple's a definite dream creator's opportunity.
You know what it is? What I learned with them is do whatever you want to do, and then go home, and then we're going to do whatever we want to do with letting you do. But you're not going to be in a process of getting shut down by us. So I wrote them a 1-minute poem. The final version was 3 lines. Still my 3 lines. And I was still in the commercial. And the entire commercial that they used, the visuals, was our dress rehearsal. So the actual day we shot for 12 hours, they didn't use any of that footage. They used our dress rehearsal footage.
Oh, amazing.
So it was just, it's just they have their own process, but you learn so much from that. But realizing like that wasn't, I didn't go to him for anything. I literally went to him because I thought it was cool what he was doing, learning that he had started this thing. And he was like, yeah, I know, because I don't need money from you. He goes, but I would love to work with you on a project. And he goes, and I remember, he goes, all my contracts are 1-pagers. He goes, we'll just work on a project together. It'd be cool. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And just ironically the next day, you just don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know what it is. So just good things happen when you put your work out. Good things happen when you release an interview. Good things happen when you put yourself out there.
Yeah. But I do want to say there is something there. There's a through line in that moment. You showed up to be in service. You wanted nothing. You wanted zero expectation. You saw something that moved you. You know what? Let me go see what I can do. You may have said, I can't give that much, but I'll give this much. I mean, $2,000's a good sum of money for a lot of people. Yeah. That's not a small sum. But you just went in, hey, I love what you're doing and I want to donate to it. Yeah. You were just being in service, and look what happened.
And to be honest, I wasn't even in the best financial situation then. I think what it was is I hadn't been moved so hard in a long time, because I think what it was is it was an older woman holding a camera for a bunch of young guys shooting a rap video. And I think I was like, what's going on here? And then I went up, and she's like, yeah, we're part of this program. And she goes, I'm a filmmaker, and I donate my time. Because the kids were like 17, 18 doing like gangster rap.
Yeah.
And it's just to see an older woman behind the camera, like directing it. I was like, this is the strangest thing ever. And she mentioned the name. I'm like, that name's so familiar. And I hit him up. I was like, oh, you're in the city working on this? I'd love to come see what you're doing. I'd love to help out. I wish somebody gave me a $2,000 budget to make a music video. Yeah. These guys are shooting this all right now, guerrilla style, in a parking lot. What could $2,000 do for them? It would be super dope. And it was exciting. Yeah. And but it was enough that there was a visceral moment. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You come out to serve, because no one gets in your way when you want to help. You're trying to help others. Very few people get in your way.
No, and that's the truth. And we got to be careful with being in service, because we all have agendas, right? And when I was in finance and I was in sales, the human psychology around sales is, if you're really good at sales and human connection, you're like, let me listen to your agenda, bring your agenda over to my agenda, interject my agenda, and then make my agenda your agenda. Now it's our agenda, but now it's really my agenda. But at the end of the day, listen to people's agendas. Come in without an agenda. You have a goal and all of that. But when you're in service expecting something, it's going to go wrong. You're not going to feel bad if there's that agenda with the situation. But sometimes you go, and I go to a charity event, I donate a piece of art, and then someone buys one, and I'm like, that was amazing. It was unexpected. Like, I donated the art, the money was raised, we did really good, and it's a cause that I backed and got behind, and then that happened. So it's like, one thing led to the other without expectation. And it was cool because then it kind of brings us to zero. Like, oh, I went, I gave, and I got, and I'm whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so those opportunities are out there.
And there are moments of magic that will definitely just give you opportunities for gratitude, which is really the emotion you're chasing. You want to feel gratitude, you know, and it's what people think having a lot of money is going to give them. Oh, and I can buy stuff to have that gratitude. But it's these moments where you're just like, man, like that was nothing short of cosmic, because the way it timed out and all of this stuff. And I was aware of this person for a while, never thought to reach out. Something, you know, maybe I felt numb for a long time, and something just, the juxtaposition of it moved me, and it allowed this to happen. And it's like, you know, another quote I love is, you know, you don't have to believe in magic, you just have to depend on it, you know? And I think that was one of those situations, being like, okay, cool. Nothing's wrong with me that I hadn't been moved in a while, because when the right thing moved me, I got moved. And I think that's the important part that I recognize from that. And I think also in the reverse of that too is don't turn yourself into a martyr. Last night I was having a conversation with someone who, they said, I'm a giver. They identified themselves as a giver. They go, I'm a giver. And I'm like, you're not a giver, you're a people pleaser.
Yeah.
I'm like,
big difference.
Yeah. I'm like, because if you were giving, you could give everything to yourself, which you're not. You're putting everybody else's needs ahead of yours, and you're depleting yourself. I'm like, true givers are people who are already existing in abundance. They put on their oxygen mask first, and now they're putting on they're helping other people. And I was like, you're not doing that. You're constantly sabotaging yourself by choosing to be liked by other people by putting their needs ahead of yours. And then that's an easy trap to fall into self-pity, which we definitely don't want to fall into. So it's like, be mindful of having the agenda, but also be mindful of not breaking your back for everybody else's needs. You have to make sure your cup is full first. And when you access love and realize you're a source of love, then you can share that in abundance because you have it. And you and I both know multiple people in this world who are constantly actual givers, and it's because they are already doing amazing and great, and now they understand that they need to be in a position of service, so they don't just get lost in their own sauce. Yeah, and I think that's the important part.
Yeah, and it's not, chasing to be liked because you may not like yourself, chasing for the love and accolades because you don't give it to yourself.
Yeah.
And those are true things, and that is true right there. And we get lost in that. We see people pleasing all the time, and they feel like they're doing the right thing, but they don't realize it. And it sucks.
Yeah. And I think it comes from childhood, because it's like you kind of sacrifice yourself for everybody else's well-being, but it's not sustainable. Definitely not sustainable. And it's going to lead to resentment. And resentment is one place that love can't breathe in a room full of resentment.
Yeah. No, I agree. And a lot of that comes back to, like, what is the most loving choice in this moment to myself, then to the other person who's experiencing it, and maybe asking that question more often than not. But here's a question I like to ask people. It's a question I ask often, and I randomly ask it all over the place. And I started asking it years ago, and I don't know if I heard it juxtaposed from a lot of different things, but the question is, if I asked you to name all the things that you love, what are the first three things that come to mind?
Learning. My puppy Boogie. She's not even a puppy. She's two, but she acts like a puppy. And my family.
So then my follow-up to that is, why didn't you make your own list?
Why
didn't you make your own list?
Why didn't I? Oh, interesting. I think for me specifically, I don't feel like I'm as cognizant about my own relationship with myself. Like I'm not claiming to not have any insecurities or any issues like that. I think it's something that crosses my mind a lot less. I have outward conversations with myself. I have all of that. Maybe I haven't. I think my biggest point of challenge to this day is still surrender. Focusing on surrender in every capacity. And I think that's probably limited my ability to really have a deeper relationship with myself potentially. Whereas I think I do a lot of reflection and insight, but that's still, it's not here. And maybe there could be, and this is me thinking out loud and processing it as we speak, there could be an avoidance of discomfort by beginning that relationship on that deeper level. Like inner child meet adult me. Knowing, like, I remember being like 8 years old and doing the math on the calendar to figure out what I was going to be when I was 18. Yeah. And having a vision of who I was going to be. And I'm not that vision. in any capacity. That wasn't an authentic vision. Like I would have been just the Hulk.
Yeah.
Just me, just the Hulk. Walking around telling kids to eat their vegetables and showing off and the only muscle that I knew about was a bicep. You know what I mean? Like,
so you have huge arms.
just it. This is me. It's just I was a reverse Popeye or something, right? But there was that kind of idea, and I think catching myself as an adult now, I think there is a little bit of a foreignness. Like sometimes where I'll walk by like a reflective mirror and be like, oh crap, like you're one of the weirdos you used to see when you were a kid and like you went downtown with mom. You know, like you saw that guy with the mohawk or the guy with the chain wallet or the girl.
The character.
The archetype. Mm-hmm. And it's like, holy crap, like you don't, internally, I feel super, super normal. Mm-hmm. And then part of me was like, oh my God, like those people probably like paid taxes and voted and went grocery shopping. And I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I thought they were just the strangest people ever. And I was having that thought even driving here, thinking about musicians. I was like, musicians always seem like the most abstract people to me. Like they weren't real. They just weren't like, who is this bass player? What does he do? Like,
yeah.
You know, like, do they think long term? What happens? Do they just disappear? I don't even know.
Do they just dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, it's one of those. And then realizing, you know, and then I think having that moment for myself often, I think there's that. And I think recently a friend told me, so this is a friend, he grew up on the streets. His mom had addiction issues. And now as an adult, he's done well for himself. He took his inner child to the dollar store and had a shopping spree. So I guess as a kid, that's something he probably wished he could have just went to the dollar store and had some chocolate bars. So he took himself and said, buy whatever you want to his inner child. And he goes, it added up to about $20. Cheetos and chocolate bars. He goes, but then I left the store and I'm eating my Cheetos and chocolate bars. And he's in great shape. You know, he's probably in the 10% body fat thing. Mm-hmm. So I think he prepped this to be it's going to be a bad night after I finish all this chocolate. But he prepped it. He goes, I'm walking down the street eating my Cheetos and chocolate. And then I hear my inner child say, why are you walking so fast? Why do you keep looking around? And he's like, well, you know, that's what we do. Like we grew up on the streets. And he goes, well, do you need to still do that? And he goes, and then the conversation went there. So I feel like sometimes, I think that's what I'm avoiding sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that. And I've caught myself avoiding that, not just with me, but also with my friends. Like there was a moment during the pandemic where I had this narrative that I can't be vulnerable because my friends weren't vulnerable. And it wasn't a safe space. And then a friend said to me, he goes, what are you talking about? He goes, we avoid you because you're not being vulnerable. And we go off to the side and we're talking about, you know, erectile dysfunction and our problems with our wives and our problems with our kids. And he goes, you didn't make it safe.
Wow.
So he goes, we were leaving you out and we've been vulnerable with each other. And there was that.
There's a separate men's group to the men's group.
Yeah. It was the moment where I was like, I'm the toxic one. I might have snickered at the wrong moment when someone was being vulnerable. I might have said something like, oh, that's the lovers group over there or whatever, not realizing that it wasn't. I was making it, I wasn't cultivating the environment. And then there was a second one where I realized, you know, I grew up, you know, with immigrant parents. And I grew up in a nice part of the city, but went to school in a challenging part of the city. And I always created this narrative about how I had to carry myself being there to avoid, you know, getting robbed.
Yeah.
And I mean, that serves me here because this is a city. You have nice stuff will get taken.
So
I can see how it's translated and it's very useful here.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, like, yeah, we all grew up like that, and you know, we all keep it real or whatever. And then my sisters came here, and then I called an LA friend, got all the recommendations, and I'm taking them to the Waldorf Beverly Hills Hotel, places I'm never going, I've never been. And then there was this moment, I was like, yeah, and then we can go see all the fancy stores on Rodeo Drive. And then my sister's like, yeah, okay, perfect. I have this Tiffany bracelet I need to get repaired. I was like, what? Oh, like you do that kind of stuff? He's like, yeah. And then like I noticed my sister had like a YSL bag. And I was like, I'm like, am I the only one who's been keeping it real? I'm like, I probably have more money than both of them, and I don't have kids. And they're like, you know, they've since kind of evolved. I don't want to say upgraded, but they've evolved. Where I realized I was kind of Peter Panning. So I think there's a lot, and you know, this is me saying it out loud in straight vulnerability right now with you, and being like, I think there is that little disconnect of that. And I think the most that I ever have those conversations with is like the early artists versus today, and they're having conversations.
Yeah.
Being like, bro, we started this to like not go crazy. How are you letting this make you go crazy?
Imagine the disconnect.
Yeah.
Well, see, what I'm hearing right now, there's 2 words. Just notice.
Just notice. Yeah.
Right? If we just notice more often. And I asked this question, there's no intention.
Yeah.
There's no real wrong answer. It's really a reflection to just notice. Do you make your own list? But look, you put learning first. Like, that's a powerful answer, right? You put your family, you put your dog. Like, dude, I love the crap out of my dog and my family and learning. But we should be first on there if we truly embody everything. But some of the people, you know what they say? My house, my dog, my car, my house, my Rolex, my job. Like, it's super superficial. So even then, like, look at the disconnect at how much work we've done to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
So, but I think just notice is really the...
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And I think, I think even the way it was framed, it wasn't like, why aren't you on the list? And thinking about it, being like, why? Because I don't catch myself operating from a place of low self-value or self-worth or thinking I'm not worthy of stuff or not good enough. Like these aren't conversations I've had with myself, but there's still probably an avoidance of, and I think it's the same way that I was talking with my friends, like, we're good. We don't have to go deep. We got 20 years. And then a friend being like, we're going deep, bro. You're getting left behind. We're going deep and you're not. Yeah, cool. Maybe when we were 16, our version of deep was like, talking about the girls that we slept with, and maybe you weren't comfortable with that because you didn't want to soil some girl's name.
Yeah.
But we were growing up together and we were talking about all our stuff together, and you were not contributing to those conversations. Yeah. And you're the reason, and we were still doing it without you.
Yeah. And
then you went out and started this whole journey, and we just kept going. And I think that was an eye opener for me. That was a massive eye opener. And just recently having a friend say something to me where they're like, there's all these things that I'm learning about you that you never told me, and I thought we were good friends. But my response was, I'm like, but I've still told you the most. You still know more about me than anybody.
Wow.
There was more, but you still know the most. So there's that gap.
You know what's interesting when you said, but I still told you the most? Something that I used to say a lot is like, you didn't ask the right questions. So like,
I wouldn't have told him to ask the right questions. He's like, because vulnerability is still scary.
I know, those are most defensive places. Like, well, you didn't ask the right question, so I didn't go there. You're like, but I told you more than everyone else, right?
Yeah, like you were still the human I was the most vulnerable with. There was just more vulnerability that no one got to know.
Yeah, more levels.
Yeah, there's more levels that nobody got to know. And that's what it was more so than anything else. Yeah. And, and then you start learning about therapy. Like this is a safer and healthier place to put some of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it becomes a really interesting thing. And I think, that level of, I think this is motivating me to even go and have a little date with myself.
Let's do it.
Buy some chocolate bars and,
get yourself a little doppio con pana, wine and dine yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and whatever that means to me, because I'm just trying. What did little version of me want that he never got, and now I can fill that gap in and just do it. And start
blow some bubbles in the wind. Who knows?
Yeah, whatever it was.
Well, that's your next challenge. Let me know when you figure that out, when you do it, and. I'm going to ask you the question I've asked you before, and I'm curious, has it changed from the last time I asked you, the conversations you've been having, or what we just had in that last question?
Yeah.
And that is humble. How do you define living a life through love?
It's definitely changed. I think my definition of living a life through love now is prioritizing peace, recognizing that I'm heading in the wrong direction if I'm operating from a place of lack or a place of desire, because peace isn't getting everything. Peace is not wanting anything. So realizing that's in a position of letting go. So for me, living a life of love is living a life of letting go of all that extra weight and baggage that you are aware of, and then doing the work to discover all the additional 1,000 pounds of baggage that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
So that's definitely operating from a place of love and understanding that, there is nothing. For me, there isn't a religion more important than self-awareness and service. And those, to me, are the actionable terms in this culture of love.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming in, for sharing, for being you, and for helping elevate this culture of love.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.